Raila has been a savior for Kenya, and I want to tell you, a giant in Kenya who has gone to sleep means that Kenya is going to have a rude awakening one of these days. If anybody is taking it as an ordinary crisis, this is a very serious crisis, and the storms will gather very soon after this burial, and you'll be able to see what Kenya is going to face. Raila Amolo Odinga was a great Pan-Africanist to the letter. You will see that during that time when he was escaping from Moi, and if you read his book, you will see that he moved out of Nairobi on a truck. And wow. First of all, he moved out of Nairobi on a truck. Then he dressed as a priest.
And went where?
And went to Kisumu. Dressed as a priest. Now, all these multiple roadblocks he went through, he was known, was seen to be a priest with all these rosaries and so on in his hand. And he now moved out of the port in the lake and crossed over to Uganda, again as a priest. Now, when he got here, he had few contacts. And picked by now one of his great friends, and I want to tell you, was Major General Jim Muhezi, who was then heading ISO.
Okay.
He was put in a safe house somewhere in Muyenga by the internal security. They gave him another passport, Ugandan passport, with the instructions of President Museveni. And he dressed like a Sudanese sheikh, like a Muslim. And going through the airport, you can see that he went disguised as one of the big sheikhs and was able to maneuver through the airport. And he went to Norway. Now, one of his great friends was Museveni, President Museveni. And
yes, I remember.
You remember that very well. You were at that time at the center of most of the things. And you'll also recall that Jim Muhezi accompanied him personally at the airport.
Right.
To make sure that with the operatives he went through, they bought the tickets, gave him the money, and he went and settled in Norway. So one of his great friends, much as they have had the political differences, was General Yoweri Kaguta Museveni. Out here also, he had very sophisticated relationship with the Kabaka of Uganda. I remember...
Tell us about that.
I remember during the times when we were in Lubiri, he came and he attended the celebrations of the Matikiraga Savasajja, Kabaka of Uganda, Maguru Nyondo. And we had lunch together in Burangi, not Burangi, in Burangi. Twekobe.
Yes.
And it had just been renovated by Rocco.
Yes.
At that time, when we were walking in, I remember the Katikiro of Uganda now, as Charles I think when he saw me, he said, Nona Ingire, Nona Ja, that is me. That's your wife. Anyway, but I want to tell you that every time the Kabaka went to Kenya, or any time Raila came here, and they had the opportunity to exchange niceties, meet the family members, and you will know the rest. I will not discuss the deeper component, but I want to tell you that he had a very excellent relationship with the Kabaka of Uganda and the Kingdom of Uganda. The third person he had very good relationship here, which I can tell you without, is that he had a very informal relationship with a number of people here in Kampala. Very, very good. And to the extent that I remember, let me give you on a lighter note. He used to stay all the time in Serena, Kampala.
Yeah.
And I want to tell you that at one point, he said, I want to go out. So I said, but the live areas here, which would be, he said, I want a live band. There is a band here. There's a band here that is well known. What's the name of that band? I said Afrigo. He said precisely, I want to go to Afrigo. Afrigo then used to play live at Bat Valley.
Yes.
I said there's a lot of confusion and fujo for you as a VVIP. That would not be an ideal. He said that's exactly where I want to be. Where there is confusion, where I want. So he had a lot of attachment with Afrigo, and we went to Afrigo in Bat Valley. From there, we went to, he said, is there another place we can go to? Went to Governor. And Charlie Lubega will tell you, we went to Governor, and he danced until almost 3 a.m. in Governor, the VIP, above 40. It took the VIP group, which was protecting him from to say, I think we better go now. But he was up and enjoying the music. He was at home.
Yeah.
He was feeling very well. Very
relaxed.
Very relaxed. The other one in Tanzania, he had very good relationship with President Magufuli.
Oh.
The late Magufuli was a very good friend, even when he was a Minister of Transport and Roads, I think roads and so on.
They were Minister for Transport at the same time, roads and works.
We used to meet in Nairobi with Magufuli and Raila Odinga in Intercontinental before it closed. And we would all stay there next to each other's rooms. And Morgan Shangrai from Zimbabwe.
Yeah.
Cyril Ramaphosa from South Africa. No wonder some people even suspected and said, but you, Mukula, maybe you're of being a president of the country. So that was my.
We need to watch you.
That was my undoing. You know, for me, as you know, I am not in that direction. But he had very close relationship with the leadership in Tanzania and Eritrea too.
Really?
Yes, and also the Ethiopians. You had an Ethiopian group he was very close to, and also the SPLA and SPLA. Yes. He was a very, very close friend of John Garang. Very, very close friend. He was also a very close friend of the current president of DRC Congo. Very, very close friends. Although he didn't help him so much down the road. And President Kagame.
Yes.
So I remember one time when he came to Soroti, after the rally in Soroti, when he came to pay a call with 23 strong member team, ministers and government officials. He spent Christmas, it was Easter in Queen Elizabeth National Game Park. Then flew directly to Kigali. You do recall that most of his association and worked very closely with the African leaders. But what was most important was very attached, very deeply attached to the self-determination of the people of South Sudan. He was very close to President elect Garang. The other point that you want to underscore here is was also a good friend of Obasanjo. Very, very close friend.
Yes, that's what fascinates me actually, Mike.
President Obasanjo remains a very, very close friend to Raila. To the extent that the two would visit each other in their homes, not meeting in hotels, in their homes.
Wow.
And every time Raila campaigned, one of the biggest fundraisers, mobilization of what you call, Raila used to call it the war chest.
Yeah.
The war chest.
Yes.
One of the pillars of that war chest was President Obasanjo, because he was able to work with this network in Nigeria and outside Nigeria to help replenish the campaign funds, both for Raila Amolo Odinga and ODM. And you'd also note that apart from Obasanjo, India, Modi, Prime Minister Modi, was a very close friend to Raila Amolo Odinga. And he knew him when he was a chief minister.
Okay.
Even today,
Gujarat.
Even today, the aircraft that is flying the remains of Raila Amolo Odinga into Kenya has been authorized and sanctioned by the Indian Air Force, by Prime Minister Modi. That is how close they were. So I want to tell you that Raila Amolo Odinga, apart from being a Pan-Africanist, was also a global figure. He was an African political giant. He was a true humanist. He was a person who believed in human rights, deepened and was able to bridge, and he was a political glue, a center of gravity as a moderate in Kenyan politics. And I want to tell you that...
Let me...
Yes, go ahead.
I wanted to ask Charles, because Charles, you'll recall that me and you started to get very interestingly involved in the politics of Kenya round about the time when Raila was coming into his own. Let me ask this question to you directly, Charles. When and at what point does Raila become a national leader in Kenya? And when does the African continent recognize that he was a force to be reckoned with?
But if we start with the last one, actually it is, because Raila was that group of, the young people who went to study in Eastern Europe or India, who were facilitated by the Progressive Club. The
Gamal Abdel Nasser.
Gamal Abdel Nasser, I think I had earlier on mentioned to you in his book, The Flame of Freedom.
Yes,
he was denied a Kenyan passport because he was a communist. So they traveled. They were put in a bus and taken to Tanzania. And I think it was Sokoine or someone who comes and meets them, gathers. I think there were like 7 of them.
Yes.
Takes them to a hotel. The following day, they are taken to see Julius Nyerere. So Julius Nyerere buys for them tickets to go to Cairo.
Wow.
And so the 7 of them, and a lot of them were there of that democracy movement, fly and stop in Kenya on Tanzanian passports. So their families come to say farewell to them. And then they fly to Nasser. To Cairo, and there they meet Nasser. So Nasser gathers them in this group of dozens of African students.
So Nasser at that time was the president of Egypt.
Yes, Gamal Abdel Nasser. And so then he decides, so now it is Nasser who has the plan. So he says, you guys, you lot, you are going to Yugoslavia, you are going to Cuba, you are going to Russia, and then the Raila and a few other guys, he told them that you are going to East Germany. So they get and so they travel. In fact, that is the same the same wave which took people like, Bidan Salis and all those other guys.
Yeah.
But although those were slightly later generation, that is that whole wave that takes them. The Kingdom Soke, and radicals. So because he was always part of that broader Pan-Africanist and leftist movement. So he gets a lot of his stature, from there. But the second part, which is internal to Kenya, is that, Kenyan politics is being dominated, at least at the presidency, by the Rift Valley and the Mount Kenya region. Or if you want to put it in ethnic terms, by the Kikuyu political class and the Kalenjin.
Yes.
So there was this very great sense of marginalization that the rest of the people, the other groups, felt. So Raila was able to channel, to ride that wave as the voice of those who have been excluded. So that is the second track of this. But the third track is that, particularly after his father dies, and we had how the GM Kariukis were gone, and the Piogama Pintos had been killed, had died earlier. He then tactfully inherited the mantle as kind of the leader of the progressives broadly. So those elements then build him a lot of authority in Kenyan politics and African politics.
So talk to me about, how he then, first of all, gets to be the most detained political figure in Kenya. And also after that, how many times he came close to being president and the circumstances where he failed to become president. He seems to, because he almost always was. And in any political contest, he never quite, and the last one was when he tried to become head of the AU, he somehow always never closed that deal of victory. Why did that elude him so much?
Because in Kenya, apart from the domination that one sees from the mountain region and the Rift Valley, also presented into a domination of the state and the electoral mechanism. So that basically explains his loss. He was, except in the last campaign in 2022, there are people who argue that he did not want to win. He didn't behave like someone who wanted to win. So that primarily part of it. But then the second thing is, let us even assume that there was no rigging. Raila was never, he never really grew into, he was never really the politician who was running to lead. In other words, he was always seen as the guy who leads the resistance and the figure of the resistance. And I think it was very difficult for many people to see him as the president, as a president.
Yes.
Yeah. So
he was a trustee. He was a trustee of opposition politics. Really, yes. That's what. Yeah.
Yeah. So he was basically seen as the custodian of that. So there is actually a sense in which Raila, he could rouse a crowd. He could command thousands to close streets, to attack the police. But he was really very good at getting them to turn out to vote.
You see, but he also, again, this is to both you and Mike, he had this very, very clever way of coining catchphrases to capture a particular moment. We had talked earlier with Mike about Kibaki Tosha. that he always somehow came up with some of these phrases. I don't know, Mike, do you want to remind us of what some of these catchphrases were that captured the moment, and somehow it became a rallying cry with the crowds?
You do recall that in 1982, during the attempted coup,
yes,
when he was suspected, although they didn't have all the evidence, you remember the Kenya Air Force, who had attempted to overthrow the government of Moi. Actually, they were not only organized, but if they were organized, they would have taken over that government.
Yeah, Hezekiah Oyugi.
Yes, and Ochoka. You remember Ochoka?
Yes.
Was eventually sent to Ghana, through Uganda, then to Ghana.
Yes.
But the point I'm trying to tell you is that some of the catchphrases that he had, apart from Kibaki Tosha, was, for example, setting up a group that he would call Pentagon. Pentagon. Now, Pentagon is the headquarters of the United States Command Corps. Command Corps, the biggest in the world, and it is not a hexagon or pentagon structure. Now, to set up a political structure and call it Pentagon, and he had the high command of Pentagon.
It's imaginative. Yeah.
That was a great imagination. I don't really get my point. Then he had...
Then the most recent one, nobody can stop reggae.
Nobody can stop reggae.
Yeah.
And, as a rabble-rouser, Raila, as a person, as an enigma, was a movement. Raila was, if Raila said, whatever he said would go as final. If he said, for example, tomorrow there will be a public holiday in Kenya, all roads and all businesses, all banks would close. There was no other person who had the ability to close Kenya, both public and private, like Raila Amolo Odinga. So his word as an enigma, as Baba, was final in Kenya. Now, having been in the politics of the opposition for a long time, and I think, as you say, that he enjoyed being in the opposition. People like Junet, the new tax, Babu Owino, the new tax, the new senator of Nairobi, Sifuna. These are the new tax of ODM. But you've got the tax that is Jimmy Orengo, Professor Nyong'o, and so on and so forth. These were people who Raila would call, and they would shift the politics and be able to drive a narrative in Kenya, which would be coined and it would be final. So any government in Kenya depended on Raila. No wonder people would ask, why and how would Raila be the one who would take, they would call sometimes nusu mukati, that's what you used to call it, that's another part. That time first with Kibaki, nusu mukati, then he signed another one with Uhuru. Handshake. When they got together, and you'd find that they would retreat and forgive each other. Again, that's a government of national unity, but he didn't have a presence in government. But one or the other, he had the ability to keep a government stable, but remain in the opposition. He also had the same thing with Ruto recently, with the Gen Z rising. And you know that in the history of Kenya, never has the army been brought out into the streets of Kenya, apart from 1982, to where the full army went to all the 47 counties and occupied all the major centers in Kenya. When the Gen Zs overrode, were able to overrun Parliament, the Supreme Court, and if they didn't because of the rain, they were going to go to State House. The point I'm trying to tell you is that when Ruto looked out after Gachagua had been rooted from being a vice president, and he had gone into the opposition. You'll note that it was only Raila who was able to hold Kenya together. Why? Most of his older thugs and new thugs wanted Ruto to go down the drain. They actually wanted the Kenya government to collapse.
Right.
But being a patriot, being a nationalist, Raila is one person who's looked at Kenya as being bigger than anyone in Kenya. The stability of Kenya being most important, most crucial to the future of the Kenyan development. He saw that if he let Ruto collapse, either the army would come in and take over, because the moment you have a failed state like it happened in Bangladesh, in Sri Lanka, and most of these countries that you know of.
And at that time, Sudan had just collapsed.
Sudan had just collapsed. Burkina Faso had also just collapsed. But Raila was able to throw in the towel and save Ruto from the punishment of the Gen Zs. Obviously, he was heavily criticized. The Boers did not go into the streets. ODM actually did not go into the streets. If ODM and the activists of the firebrand of ODM had gone into the streets, I want to tell you that the history of Kenya would not be what we are talking about today. It would have shifted a long time ago. But against the odds, he was able to very easily talk to Ruto, agree with the players, and he was able to put in his people like Opiyo Wandayi. Was able to bring in who is in energy, the secretary, the CS of finance. Then he also brought in our friend from Mombasa, and so on and so forth. The point I'm trying to tell you, that when you look at Raila, many people, especially now when you have the extremists in the names of people like Gachagua, many others who have now taken extreme left, and they don't care what happens. Then you have the extreme right from Ruto's group. The only person who was what you call a sober brain was able to play the role of a father. No wonder he was called Baba. Able to bring the active Kenyan politicians into being one, both in Parliament, Senate, and governors at all the 47 counties, was Raila. What am I saying? Kenya will only get to realize the void of Raila because Kenya is back to the crossroads. And I want to tell you.
Right. I want to
tell you, we'll discuss it as we go on, but I want to tell you very openly, those who are in Kenya who are listening, they are back to the drawing board. And the one thing is that ODM has not been able to manage, and they have to manage a succession because Raila did not prepare succession ODM. Number two, the center of gravity of Kenya. There is no other father figure in Kenya who can now be able to play the role of Raila in the future politics of Kenya. Number three is that President Ruto, alone without Raila, and with the new young turks of Kenya, will have an uphill task in 2027. Because I want to tell you that some of the people who are extremists in Kenya are going to play what you call extreme populist politics and are going to drive as much as possible, try to drive the government of Ruto into a point where they would want him off the center stage.
So, Charles, before we go into the post-Raila era, I just wanted to go back a bit because Mike has talked about Raila as an enigma, but goes on to actually describe the kind of person who could exist in different worlds at the same time. That he's at once the leader of the opposition and opposed to the incumbent, has a grievance against the incumbent, but then at the same time understands that the government must remain stable and not collapse. And so he intervenes. Then he supports him when there's a fallout between him and his deputy president. And I just wanted to ask you you can also bring in, your own issue about catchphrases, particularly that description you were telling me earlier on about how he commentated politics of Kenya like it was a football match. But that's on the lighter side. But on a serious side, how was he able to reach both of, play different roles that seem to be diametrically opposed?
But one of it was that because in the later periods, he became wealthy. So there's a part of him which was a realistic businessman who was part of this class, and
yes.
and that moderated his politics, because he had you would know this. He had a monopoly over certain sectors of the Kenyan economy. He was very big on sugar. He had the gas market and things like that. So there's a part of him that was just alive to his interests. So that explains why for Raila there was always a red line. But then the other thing is that he is someone who was incapable almost of harboring a grudge.
That is true.
Yeah.
Yes, and because one of the reasons for that, he had an ability to extremely compartmentalize.
Wow.
So that he would do, and and people who were close to him said that you visit his home, and he can spend an evening in which you couldn't even get him to speak about politics for a second.
Really?
Yeah, and so because of that, even if you were in your position, you could approach him and be with him, and he would not show you any antagonism, nor would you feel, that this is a political
hostility.
Yeah. So, and just let me give you an example of his pragmatism. He was part of this NAC alliance that wins the election in December 2003, and they come to government in December 2002. They come in government in January 2003. So this is a guy who had fallen out with Moi. This is the Moi who had detained him. And one of the most horrible people in Kenyan politics was the chairman of KANU at the coast, Sharif Nasir. You remember?
Yes.
He was a horrible person.
Okay.
But it turns out that Sharif Nasir was in trucking. He used to own trucks.
Yes.
Things that were good to Uganda and go on to Rwanda and Zaire. Now, he used to carry contraband. And the Ugandans knew this.
Yes.
But the first time they had tried to move on him, some years back, Moi had intervened. And because Uganda at that time had a policy of, we will do everything to make Moi happy, so that it does not disrupt our supply lines.
Supply lines, yeah.
So Moi asked them to leave Sharif Nasir alone. So Sharif Nasir was carrying contraband of his trucks, and the Ugandans couldn't support it. So Moi loses power. So as soon as these guys come, in January of 2003, the Ugandans impound Sharif Nasir's trucks. Because Sharif Nasir was no longer in power, Moi was out of power. So a friend of mine at our mission in our embassy in Nairobi is telling me this story. So they receive a call and say, we have a small problem with Kenya, with the new government, these seized trucks. But we are, someone is going to call you. We have agreed how this thing will be resolved. So someone will call you. And someone calls, and who was it? It was Raila Odinga on the line. And this is a minister. He was already a minister. And
roads and
he was
transport.
now helping, Ugandan to release the contraband of Sharif Nassir.
Sharif Nassir.
The guy who had been one of his leading persecutors. So, and that is this compartmentalization. He totally took away the personal from the public and politics. He didn't play politics as an adversary. I mean, he didn't bring his personal self and his personal issue into the politics. Yeah.
So I'm going to drop this question, and I'll start again with Mike, and then I'll come to you, Charles. Mike, in terms of the surprising things that Charles has just talked about, the most recent surprise that then drops out of nowhere was that after a very hostile election competition between him and Ruto, suddenly they both turn up at Chisozi with President Museveni. The three of them, Raila, Ruto, and Museveni. How did that happen? Now you can tell us, I'm sure. It's not, Mike, I'm sure you know.
You know, one of the things, when I can share this with you openly, that when we had that difference of the votes between Ruto and Raila, and my various discussions with President Museveni on phone, even sometimes personal, one-to-one. This is not classified. One of the things President Museveni encouraged me to send a message to Raila was to reconcile and also talk to Ruto. Ruto is a very close friend of mine. Very to come to me in Serena, and he would spend 2 hours, 3 hours in my room. That time was, he had been removed from being a minister by Raila. And he was free, he could come into the room, we have a chat, have a cup of tea, share about politics and business. It was then in Lifeline House, he had the insurance. He had not grown financially as large as he is now. But one of the things President Museveni mentioned, which was very, very critical, is that the gap was too narrow. And the votes Raila had garnered and the votes Ruto had garnered, the difference was very small.
Yeah.
Meaning that he encouraged me to talk to Raila and to ask him to look at possibly talking to Ruto. I passed that message to Raila. And he said, okay, let me think about it. Let me consult with my people. Let's see how we can go about it. Now, a number of engagements went on, a number of meetings went on internally in Kenya first. Now, when President Museveni made one of the trips in, I think it was an IMF World Bank thing, you remember that meeting in International Conference Center? And when he had a tete-a-tete with both of them, Raila came in here and had a quiet meeting with Museveni. Both of them now flew directly. Raila flew out of Kisumu with his helicopter direct to meet Museveni in the farm, and also flew directly. They didn't go through the airports. They flew directly. And that's how they arrived at that position. And to get the two of them, and I want to tell you that these elder statespersons are very important. Both of them respected Museveni. And I think before that, Raila had also flown to meet the president of Tanzania. Suluhu. And she also conveyed the same. In my discussion, therefore, with Raila, he was a person who was amiable, a great very forgiving, very tolerant, and he would never bear a grudge on anybody. You know that it was a very acrimonious and highly engaging electoral period. Many people lost their lives, many people were killed, many were detained, and some of them very close to Raila, some were young people. And you'll say that these violent clashes did not bear fruits for Kenya. Actually, they disintegrated the unity, the cohesion of Kenya. What am I saying? I think that the meeting in the farm with Museveni, when they were looking at the cattle, away from the cattle, was able to bring the two together. That was the bridging. The second bridge, although they did not go into what you call formal engagements in terms of a government of national unity, but they now resumed the tete-a-tete, consult here, and all his rights were, he regained all of them. You know, he had been denied the use of the VIP, he had been denied, all his security had been withdrawn, all that was reinstated. Support from government started coming a little bit in, and later on when the Gen Z riots started emerging, I think that's when now the advisors came in. I had a very close discussion with one of the leaders of youth when they came here, and we had a one-to-one. And you know, when they passed that bill, the finance bill, where certain taxes were being imposed, which eventually led
to the riots.
To the riots.
Yeah.
One of them went very early in the morning to meet, said, I have not slept, I want to meet you, Your Excellency, the President. In that meeting, they walked in the lawn of State House. Said, you wanted to talk to me, come and talk to me. So in the discussion, they told the President, don't sign that bill, please, don't sign that bill. And are you sure? He said, yes. Are you convinced that I should not sign that bill? Said, please don't. Very high ranking. He said, okay, I will not sign the bill. Second thing, talk to Raila. Talk to Raila, bring him on board. I think the key players, the centers of gravity in UDA, were able to convince, but also not just convince, but even Ruto, so that it was important to bring Raila into the gameplay of the management of politics in Kenya. What I can tell you is that when you look at all these iconic catchphrases, Baba, while you were away, this was happening. You know, you remember that catchphrase? No Raila, no peace. You remember that one? Kibaki Tosha, that was 2002.
Yeah.
Tuko pamoja, remember the Tuko pamoja?
Yes.
Then the struggle continues. Mapambano, you used to sing, Mapambano bado inaendelea. Meaning the struggle continues. Nobody, and you have said nobody can stop reggae. Azimio la umoja. Remember Azimio la umoja?
Yes.
Yes. Let the people decide. He believed in the rights and the voice of the people. That was Raila. We will not be intimidated. His words, he used to say, we will not be intimidated. And he kept on saying, freedom is coming. He believed that he was Joshua. You remember that coin of him being a Joshua to deliver them to the promised land. All those catchphrases were meant to whip and give hope to the ordinary Kenyans. And you remember, every time you went to Mathare, one of the Mathare or Chibera or any of these Kamkunji, all these meetings, no other politician will pull that crowd and that number, whether in CBD of Nairobi, outside Nairobi, in Mombasa, in the areas of, say, the areas like all the urban centers, you would find that even in Eldoret, Raila was able to pull crowds. What am I saying? All this dictate and the narrative show you that the description of an enigma, a man who never used money, here and most of the politics in the African continent, money has now become the rallying point of
the currency.
The currency. People use money more than any other things to bring people. Raila never used to do that. And one thing that I also want you to catch is that he was a great supporter of Maseno. And if you want, yes, a great supporter of Maseno. If you wanted to catch Raila out, talk about football, when Arsenal is playing, all the other things are put aside. He will go in and watch football passionate. He was like Kagame. So football to him was more than religion.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
Now, I wanted to follow on that, Charles, just to say that I know I've said this before, I'll say it again, that in a sense, the Gen Z protests announced the arrival of a different generation of opposition politics and politicians, one in which for the first time Raila was not involved. And so in a sense, it marked the end of him as the boss or the owner of opposition politics. But also the fact that he had wanted to leave the national scene and go and be chairman of AU. In a sense, it was also a statement to say, okay, I've done what I can do with you guys. And then, now he's left us. So in a sense, he's wound up his business and gone. Where does that sort of leave Kenya now? What is the opportunity that his departure creates? Because I want to argue that it could go either of two ways. Either there's now no rallying force, the place splinters, the politics splinters and becomes very extreme and you have no basis, or it forces the body politic of Kenya to reflect and become, how do we walk back and use this opportunity to reunite? What do you think?
Well, perhaps, let us talk of what actually happened during the Gen Z protest. And as you said, because when those protests started and Ruto felt that it was really a crisis and an existential issue for the government, our understanding is that he called Uhuru Kenyatta and said, we really are in a mess. Can we put our differences aside and help me here? Let's work something out. So Uhuru told him, I'm really out of the game, but this is the subject for Raila. And it's very important because when Raila then goes, he specifically says that, I came here with basically by the consent of our Azimio chairman, who was Uhuru Kenyatta. But why was that important? Because what the Gen Z protests did, they did something which Raila and some of these opposition giants had never been able to do in the history of their struggle. Yes. They were able to bring out protesters in 46 counties at the same time.
Wow.
The ODM and these people had never been able to achieve that. So there was a part of it in which he himself was alarmed. They saw that a new force, a new force had arrived on the scene. and you know, whose slogan expressly was that they were tribeless, partyless,
leaderless,
and leaderless. So the partyless and you know, and the leaderless really unsettled the old both the state and you know, and the opposition establishment. But like you said, it was at that point that the turning point happened. It was clear that there had been a sea change in Kenyan politics, and the structure of you know, of ODM as you know, as the leading force was over. Was over. Now, where does that leave us? You know, and Mike has touched on this. You know, the way Kenyan politics is, Kenyan politics has always run on the fact that there is a class of elders who are, I mean, I'll give you an example. There were people like Njenga Karume,
yes,
who would go and not just go to see Kibaki, for example. He would go and sit in Kibaki's bedroom. And he leaves from there and goes to see Raila, and he goes and sits on the side of Raila's bed. So Kenya had a lot of those politicians, and those are the guys who behind the scenes were able to help a lot of things happen, including that 2008 thing. Every time Kenya has gone to the edge, that group of people has rallied. The last one of them was Raila. So the way now politics has to be negotiated or a crisis is different. No one knows what will happen. And the people are even beginning to worry what will happen, not even in the 2027 election, but between now and there, because there is a sense that there has been a lot of radicalization of the youth. And as Mike suggested earlier, that really the center of Kenyan politics, because that is where Raila and his played, that the center of Kenyan politics is dead, and that you are going to have to deal with extremes. So it is actually a very, very risky phase for Kenya. And we will see what happens in the next couple of weeks. But essentially, structurally, they have gone, they could have put one foot in the grave with this.
Wow. So as a way of sort of winding up our conversation about Raila, I want to put this question, same question to both of you, but I want to start with Mike and then I'll come back to you, Charles. Mike, you mentioned earlier on that the greatest challenge is that Raila didn't organize a succession within ODM, and that's going to cause them a crisis. But that poses a general problem or for reflection by the whole of Africa, where we have very strong leaders who have not organized their succession. Many of them are now in a very advanced age. We have our own situation here, as you know. I'm putting you on the spot there. You know your chairman. And so that question of sudden departure or soon departure, if I may put it that way, and then the problem of managing the succession. So what lessons does Raila leave us, those of us who are not in Kenya, but who can relate to the circumstances that Raila has left us with?
I think, Robert, what you need to know is that success without succession equals failure. And nobody is immortal. The assumption by leaders in a way to say that you have absolute power and control without managing transitions can be dangerous in the African context and African politics. One of the greatest examples you see where success was managed very well and transitioned very well was Tanzania. Mwalimu Julius Nyerere, I remember very well, I was with the President Museveni campaigning in Serere. I'm the one who told him that Mwalimu has passed on in London a few minutes back. He was a very close friend of Nyerere. He had been addressing a rally anyway. He didn't know. But one of the things Mwalimu did was that by the time he passed on, you know that the army, first of all, was stable, which is core in the African politics. The army in Tanzania never interfered with the politics. One. Number two is that he was able to transition and the Chama cha Mapinduzi, CCM, to a new leadership. First, he started with the presidency, then he went to the party. After he handed over the party to Mwinyi, then he came back now to manage the transition inside the party. At least he was there for close to 4 or 5 years. Then he stepped aside. That was a very smooth transfer of power, right from government and the party. The lesson you pick from here is that in Kenya now, you realize that President of Kenya, all the presidents of Kenya, right from Moi, never managed transition. No one, don't have a single member of parliament or senator or governor who is from Kano. Kano went with Moi and with and so on and so forth. The same thing happened with Jubilee. Jubilee was hijacked by UDA. So when Ruto was exiting from Jubilee, he went with the what you call the anchor players from Jubilee, and the shell in Jubilee, to the extent that Kenyatta, apart from his money, does not have a Jubilee to reckon with. Now, the only powerful opposition party you had, and you have had in Kenya, was ODM. Because of the enigmatic and movement style of governance that Raila had, when he could rally support from the ordinary Kenyan, because his slogan resonated very well with the ordinary Kenyans. Now, when he was moving to AU, he handed over leadership to Anyang' Nyong'o. Anyang', as you know, is an intellectual. He brought into politics because of his alliance with Raila, but really he was not cut for. He's not enigmatic. He's not as charismatic as Raila was. So
it's not ODM conk.
ODM conk. Now, what you have now in ODM are the new tax. When you talk about Junet, Junet is fiery. You have got Babu Owino. He's also fiery, a populist. You have also got the Joho. But you know, Joho does not spread outside the coast. He's limited to the coast. Junet also tries, but he has not built charisma. He's neither here or there. With the Somalis, he's not there. In the lowland, Nyanza is not seen as one of the original, he's seen as a Somali. Then you have also seen our brother, the senator from Nairobi. He is not a Luo. At the origins and the root structures, and those who own ODM, who believe that ODM is there, are really from Nyanza land. We have ODM, Raila has not managed the transition. So you're going to have a power struggle, a crisis inside ODM. Number two, because he did not manage a transition in ODM, ODM is going to melt away into factions which are tribal. And as my brother Charles Onyango-Obbo says, it is definitely going to be a crisis. Kenya is now moving back to the what you call the crossroads. The crossroads in Kenya now will define the future of the leadership of Kenya. Ruto does not have control in Western Kenya. He does not have control in Nyanza fully. He's to build up a team play there. In the coast, he hasn't got the grasp of the coast yet. In the Central, he's almost lost it or lost it. He has also got a bit of an imbalance in the Rift Valley. So you have a serious problem in Kenya. And as Charles said, if anybody has not smelt the coffee, they're in for a very rude shock. Because when push comes to shove, I want to tell you that the new players, the new centers of gravity, who have come in with a new paradigm, the Gen Zs, who are faceless, tribeless,
partyless, leaderless,
and tribal-less.
Yes.
That group does not have a leadership. A group which does not have a leadership does not have a center of gravity.
Yeah.
Now, without a center of gravity, and that means that they don't have a leadership, and yet they have so much power, and they have now captured AI, they have captured the ability to manipulate and use the social media. I want to tell you, if anybody is taking it as an ordinary crisis, this is a very serious crisis. And the storms will gather very soon after this battle, and you'll be able to see what Kenya is going to face. Raila has been a savior for Kenya, and I want to tell you, a giant in Kenya who is going to sleep means that Kenya is going to have a rude awakening one of these days.
Charles, what lessons does Raila leave for Africans? Yeah.
You see the ODM, Raila's party, it is post 2002, it is the party that has held together longest.
Yeah.
But the reason for that, I think, is primarily because it was in opposition.
Okay.
If it had been in power, it would have collapsed, because there is this turnover of parties in Kenya. It is not a bug. It is a feature of the politics.
Okay.
Because I think that one of the things that changed in the political culture when Kanu ended, I think there was a social, political, and cultural shift away that would never accept a dominant ruling party. So even with the best of intentions, in Kenya, you cannot craft an enduring party today. It will take another 10 years. So Raila tried, because, Bob, if you think of it, there is no political coalition. Even ODM itself it has had a lot of internal changes and alliances. There is not a single party that has survived as is beyond one election cycle. Now, wow. So, I assume that in the 2027 election, you'll not have a UDA, or you'll have a UDA with an alliance of 5, 6 other different parties. So it will be a totally different creature. What Raila has tried to do is that he has stepped over. He's still like this big figure, but actually he's no longer the leader of the ODM. The leader of the ODM is Gladys Wanga. So, the ODM has complete new party leadership.
Yeah.
Some of them are young, but they're incredibly clever, which is one of the things, at least, that he has done. There's Sefunas of this world and all this, really, really very clever, and they have got some very smart parliamentarians. So I don't actually think that they will be necessarily interested in keeping ODM as is.
Okay.
Yeah, that given this feature of Kenyan politics, it might even actually be a good thing for the ODM to die, so that you have another political structure which is constituted away from the image of the party and the politics that was represented by Raila.
So for me, I guess what is left is to thank you guys for putting aside the time. I mean, it's Raila Odinga was not by any measure a small man. And he was not just a big man in the sense that we know big men to be in Africa. He was a colossus. Now really at the level of the Nyereres, the big African figures that existed on the continent. So I think it was worth our time to come and speak. So thank you very much, Charles. But also for us we haven't seen Mike in a long time. He looks way younger than, and he looks fresh. So, but Charles, Mike has kept up the image, man. He's looking good. He's, yeah.
The sun.
Yeah,
no, but Charles, I think my brother Robert is being very kind to me. When I joined Robert in the money market, private sector, we now face the reality by chasing the velocity of money.
Which is a futile
and I want to tell you, Charles, me and Robert swim with the, let me be brutal, sharks.
Yeah.
So
you can't stop.
When I hear Robert sometimes remove the gloves, I appreciate, I do understand. I'm saying, and I want to say that I am happier in the private sector.